Okay, here is part 2 from my Riverside High School students' lifespan development. We just finished up this slide, just to kind of let you know that you're in the right place here. We're moving on now to talk about nutrition in young adulthood. I remember when I was a young adult, your age, maybe a little bit older, I didn't think much about what I put into my body or how it affected my functioning. In college, I was often at McDonald's or Wendy's and eating fast food, things that were very convenient, quick, and cheap. And these foods that are not very nutritional or have very little nutritional value or have the wrong kinds of things in them for us, it can really negatively impact how we function. Metabolism is how much energy the body needs, and metabolism slows down with age. We should be limiting the intake of saturated and trans fats, cholesterols, added sugars, salt, and alcohol. Heart disease risk increases with increases in these intakes. Obesity obviously is a problem in this country, in this state, in this school district, and it's a growing problem. Body mass index, often referred to BMI, this is the ratio of body weight to height related to total body fat. Anything equal to or less than a 25 is a healthy BMI or body mass index. Health risks increase. The higher one's BMI is. And here's another one you might pick with your phone. You've got disease risk relative to normal weight and waist circumference. In terms of men and women, you can kind of look at this and see underweight, normal, overweight, obesity, and extreme obesity. You can start to look at this and understand the relationships. Low density lipoproteins. These are cholesterols that impede blood flow by causing fatty deposits to accumulate in the arteries. High density lipoproteins, HDLs, are cholesterols that keep the arteries clear and break down the low density lipoproteins. Now, the LDL-HDL ratio is important to health. The LDL should be less than 160. The HDL should be greater than 40 in men and greater than 50 in women. So, lower LDLs and higher HDLs reduce the risk for cardiovascular disease. Social factors in terms of health. People in poverty are less likely to obtain adequate health care and are more often in poor health. We've talked about that in this class before. People who struggle, who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, their parents and themselves as young adults don't have the access to quality health care that maybe others who are well off or better off do have to health care. And it makes a big difference. People with better incomes as a result of education are less likely to be ill and less likely to die from chronic diseases. Gender. Women, not just in the U.S., but virtually everywhere in the world. U.S. women, though specifically, live longer than men, and they're less likely to die from homicides. And a lot of this we could explain in terms of culture or cultural reasons. In the U.S., the residents of inner city neighborhoods have the poorest health conditions. African American men in large urban areas have lower life expectancy, even than men in developing countries. Homicide rates, for example, among African American men, specifically in inner cities, are at epidemic levels. I mean, they're extremely high. We'll talk about that at a later point in time. Poverty plays a major role. There are a greater proportion of African Americans who are poor related to other ethnic groups or racial groups. Also, African American men have a lesser likelihood or lower likelihood of being treated for chronic diseases. For adolescents and or former operational thinkers, legitimate answers derive from logic only. Deductive reasoning leads to one conclusion, and one conclusion only, and generally they think their conclusions are correct. Now, this isn't every adolescent, but these are generally characteristics of adolescent thinking. Okay, authorities are experts to be relied upon, and there's a clear distinction between right and wrong. There's very little gray area or doubt. For young adults, however, this is kind of where we're at now. For young adults who are a little bit older, thinking differs qualitatively. Young adults start to recognize and examine different viewpoints. They are the source of their own authority. They're not looking to authority figures like teachers or parents or people like that. They become their own source of their own authority. They have definite commitments to a particular point of view. A lot of you are very mature in this class. You are adolescents by definition, but a lot of you have matured in terms of your thinking into this young adult phase, I would suspect. Post-formal thought. Truth may vary across situations. The solution must be realistic to be reasonable. Ambiguity, things that are vague or nebulous, gray area stuff, and contradiction are tolerated. Logic and emotion are integrated. They're tied together. So thinking becomes qualitatively different and more mature into young adulthood. Reflective judgment. There are 7 stages and 3 phases of how adults reason through various types of dilemmas. The first one is pre-reflective reasoning. First-hand observation or authority are the source of knowledge rather than just evaluation of evidence. Know with complete certainty, and they're absolutely correct. Do not understand that certain problems might not have only one correct solution. Then we have quasi-reflective reasoning, stages 4 through 5, and these are in your textbook as well. Believe that nothing can be known for certain due to missing information or methods of obtaining evidence. Thinking here, we view knowledge as subjective. Everybody thinks about things or holds certain things to be true in a different way. So things are not as objective, they're subjective. They view judgments as idiosyncratic because they do not understand how evidence entails a correct judgment, are less persuasive with their positions on controversial matters. Then stages 6 through 7 hold firm convictions. We're with reflective reasoning. Hold firm convictions reached after careful consideration of multiple viewpoints. Evidence, argument, and careful analysis are required to construct knowledge. Know they must continually reevaluate beliefs in light of new evidence. Do people think at their most complex level of reflective judgment on a daily basis? Probably no. Not usually, because the environmental supports typically are lacking to do so. In post-formal thinking, decision-making and problem-solving emphasize change and context-dependent principles instead of conformity and context-free principle. The pragmatics of the situation, the practicality of the situation, emotion, and social aspects, more than logic alone, and the relative rather than the absolute nature of rules and norms. Personality in young adulthood. So we're switching over to something a little different. We've talked a little bit about personality in our class. What is the lifespan construct? How do adults create scenarios and life stories? What are possible selves? Do they show differences during adulthood? And what are personal control beliefs? A lifespan construct is one's unified sense of the past, present, and future. A scenario refers to expectations of how one's future life will play out. It helps people formulate a game plan, do scenarios, and a way to track progress. And we also talk about social clocks. This is a person's timetable, tagging the time or age by which future goals or events are to be completed. We all have a lifespan construct. Even at your young age, you have a lifespan construct. You have this sort of unified sense of where you were, what you came from, past events, kind of what you're doing right now in high school with your boyfriends, your girlfriends, your families, your activities, and then what you're going to be doing in the future, where you're going to go to school, college, vocational stuff, whatever the case may be. And we all have scenarios, even at your young age, these expectations of how your future life will play out. You probably have a plan or an idea of what's going to happen. Like, I'm going to go to WVU, I'm going to major in biology, I'm going to get a great job, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have how many kids, and all this stuff. So, and then the social clock. Everybody has personal timetables. I have a friend who said, by the time I'm 30, I want to have 2 kids. By the time I'm 40, I want to have, I want to have this house in this neighborhood. By the time I'm 55, I want to be retired and have money in the bank. And by the time I'm 60, I want to be traveling the world. So, and everybody's social clocks are probably a little different. A life story is a personal narrative, organizing past events into a coherent sequence, reflecting one's identity, ideology, and goals. Begins forming in late adolescence once identity has taken shape. So the life story starts to form about right where you guys are right now at your age and your stage and position in life. From middle age onward, it is reshaped to form an appealing ending, yielding new beginnings for future generations. Then we have possible selves. Possible selves are representations of one's hoped for selves and feared for selves. In your book, we'll talk about these as well. Motivate behaviors to achieve or avoid these selves. With increasing age, important possible selves concern personal matters more than family matters. Young and middle-aged adults are more optimistic about achieving their hoped-for selves because there's still time. Much older adults perceive the self as remaining stable. And physical health is an important feared self, especially as we get older. We have fears about our physical health. We seem to be more invincible or feel more invincible in terms of our physical health when we're younger. Personal control beliefs. The extent to which performance depends on our own effort or ability rather than outside forces. Personal control beliefs greatly affect personality, social, health, intellectual, and career outcomes. Inconsistent research on this stuff. Young adults have greater internal control beliefs than older ones, but other findings show the opposite of that. Why? Well, control beliefs vary depending on the domain in which they are studied. Intelligence, health. Some people feel, some young adults feel like they control their ability to be smart, to be intelligent, or they control their health. Others believe that they have little, if any, control over how they do in school, their grades, their intelligence, or their health. So the research is somewhat inconsistent. Some examples of domain-specific findings are people's perceived control of marital happiness with increasing age, and one's development declining with age. One domain non-specific finding is that satisfaction is greater for younger adults who attribute their success to efforts, and older adults who attribute their success to their ability. Some research shows 4 types of control. Control from within oneself, control over oneself, control over the environment, and control from the environment. Another research distinguishes 2 other types of control, primary versus secondary. Oops, didn't mean to do that. This is our last slide. Primary control involves modifying the external environment, the physical, social environment, to fit one's own needs and goals. Example, asking a teacher for help with difficult material. Why are these primary? Because these strategies are often tried initially or tried first. Secondary control, this is modifying one's cognitions, their goals, their behavioral standards. Example would be attributing failure on a test to the task difficulty instead of ability. So the test was too hard. It's not that I couldn't do this, but this task or this test item was too difficult. Why is this called secondary? Because these strategies are typically attempted or tried when primary control efforts fail or don't work. Primary and secondary control operate in parallel, together at the same time during the first half of life. Primary but not secondary control declines in the middle of life. And that does finish up the stuff with chapter 10. So you have 2 parts to this video, and this nicely takes care of what we would have talked about today in class Friday. Thank you very much.